Sulfur clouds spreading and temperatures spiking dangerously at Campi Flegrei have become the latest warning signs, drawing intense attention from scientists and residents across southern Italy. Beneath the cities and coastal towns surrounding Naples, one of the world's most closely watched volcanic systems is showing signals that the underground heat and pressure may be rising once again. Have you ever imagined breathing in a world where even the air feels different, where the invisible suddenly becomes noticeable, almost alive? In the shadow of the Campi Flegrei caldera, a ghostly breath now seems to linger above the Bay of Naples, drifting through narrow streets and ancient archways. The air carries a faint metallic scent, the unmistakable trace of sulfur rising from deep underground. The familiar rhythm of life in nearby towns has begun to feel subtly altered. In Pozzuoli, where people live directly above parts of the caldera, residents have noticed strange changes in the atmosphere. A thin haze sometimes gathers above the streets in the early morning, casting a pale yellow tint over the waterfront and market squares. For many locals, the signs are impossible to ignore. Vendors pause as their eyes sting slightly in the sulfur-tinged air. Fishermen glance at the sky and the shoreline, quietly discussing the unusual smell carried by the breeze. Children walking to school notice the faint shimmer hanging above the streets, wondering why the air suddenly feels different. At first, some hope it might simply be weather, an odd shift in humidity or sea winds. But as the days pass and the haze returns again and again, that hope begins to fade. The explanation lies beneath their feet. These sulfur clouds are not just atmospheric curiosities. They are signs of powerful geothermal activity rising through cracks in the Earth's crust. Campi Flegrei is not a single volcano, but a vast volcanic caldera, an ancient, collapsed system capable of producing enormous eruptions in Earth's past. For centuries, it has remained restless, but mostly quiet, a giant breathing slowly beneath the ground. Now, scientists monitoring gas emissions, ground movement, and temperature changes are watching closely as the system shows renewed signs of activity. The sulfur drifting through the streets is a reminder that far below the surface, heat, pressure, and magma continue to move. And as these signals grow stronger, one question hangs in the air over the Bay of Naples. Is this simply another phase in the caldera's long, restless cycle, or the early sign that Campi Flegrei is awakening once again? In the past, the volcano made its presence known with mild tremors, mysterious vapors, and legends retold by each new generation. Elderly locals sometimes mention the bradyseismic crises of previous decades, recalling the subtle but never-ending movement underfoot. But no one, scientist or resident, remembers a time quite like this. Today, teams from around the world fix their gaze on the caldera, recording the highest fumarole temperatures in the current cycle, 185 degrees Celsius, an unprecedented spike for this period, measured at key observation points. This fevered breath carries more than just heat. The rising vapors are loaded with sulfur, the stinging element and age-old warning sign of volcanic unrest. It floats through open windows, settles in gardens, and leaves powdery relics on every surface. For many, it's merely a nuisance, but for the sensitive, it triggers headaches, skin rashes, and bouts of coughing that resist simple remedies. To those living here, the sulfur tang in the air isn't just chemical, it's the taste of unease, an encoded message from the restless earth. But what is driving Campi Flegrei to exhale this perilous mixture? What processes beneath the crust are giving rise to this sulfurous sigh? And what does it signal for the hundreds of thousands whose homes and lives are rooted in this vulnerable landscape? What are the implications for a region whose history, economy, and culture have long danced on the edge of this furious caldera? Tonight, we move through the mist, attempting to uncover not just the science behind the sulfur and the heat, but what it means to inhabit such a land. As the fumes drift further and the ground warms ever more, we all must confront questions for which there are few comforting answers. What dormant power is awakening below? And how will the story of this region be recast if the volcano's warnings are not heeded? Beneath the fine piazzas and close-knit neighborhoods of Pozzuoli, just west of Naples, a different reality unfolds. Campi Flegrei is no solitary peak, it's a massive caldera, a sprawling hollow formed by past explosions and collapses, an ancient wound that stretches for miles. To visualize its scale is to challenge the imagination. Under homes, businesses, and Roman paving stones runs a network of fractured, restless earth, infused with magma and gases from the bowels of the planet. This caldera is far more than a geological curiosity. Local history remembers earthquakes and swelling ground as part of life, and guidebooks reference Roman ruins, sunken villas, and underwater relics at Baiae, all direct results of volcanic change. Yet, no legend can quite capture the haunting reality that so much daily life here is conducted above one of the Earth's most dangerous volcanic systems. For centuries, the monster slumbered in partial peace. Minor earthquakes punctuated the calm, a rattle here, a jolt there, silverware jumping in kitchen drawers, pitchers askew on the wall. People came to accept these as routine. To live here meant living with low-level uncertainty. But now, the Earth is speaking with different urgency. Instruments, satellites, ground movement sensors, geochemical monitors describe a ground that is rising, swelling faster and more unpredictably with each passing month, sending a signal that echoes louder than before. The uplift is not uniform or easily dismissed. In some spots, the ground is rising at a tempo not seen since the bradyseismic crises of the 1980s, when emergency evacuations sent tens of thousands fleeing Pozzuoli. This upward movement, driven by accumulating pressure below, distorts roads, threatens historic structures, and makes maintenance an ongoing battle. Residents often keep tape measures near doorways to track new cracks, some tiny, others alarmingly deep, knowing these daily shifts reflect deeper forces at work. Geophysicists, such as Giovanni Macedonio, have recently warned that the Campi Flegrei is one of the planet's most dangerous volcanic giants, its potential not to be underestimated. The swarms of small earthquakes now crisscrossing the caldera are the subject of intense study, each shake and shudder analyzed for deeper meaning. If what we're seeing is only the prologue to a greater event, it raises the urgent question: what happens if the volcano is shaken fully awake? Look beneath the ancient paving stones, and you'll sense the difference. The ground beneath Pozzuoli is no longer still. Cracks reflect both modern stresses and the memories of Roman roads. Each week brings another report. A rise of several centimeters measured at observation stations. Fresh fissures discovered in a marketplace wall. Another residential street buckling. In the last months, satellite monitoring has confirmed significant uplift, a metric not easily dismissed as trivial in a region so vulnerable. It's the visible surface of a deeper mystery. What drives this inexorable swelling of the Earth? Geologists concur that the cause is pressure building from below, a mixture of magma migration and superheated water, gases accumulating in geological reservoirs, relentlessly pushing against the brittle crust. If the rock is porous enough, gas vents escape as fumaroles. If not, the energy builds, the crust fracturing only under extreme stress and sometimes silently. The consequences are felt everywhere. Infrastructural damage, roads needing repairs, pipes, springing leaks, centuries-old walls growing hazardous is now part of daily maintenance. City planners work alongside volcanologists to assess risk zones, legal liabilities, and structural vulnerabilities. Homeowners walk their properties at dawn, searching for new stress lines of ground movement. Even the air plays a role. As sulfuric fumes become more pronounced, they seep into homes and public spaces, stinging throats and eyes, prompting residents to keep windows sealed tight even in the heat of summer. Hospitals and pharmacies report upticks in respiratory complaints and eye irritation. Health officials distribute guidance on reducing exposure during peak emission events. Shops are sold out of air purifiers and bottled water, residents responding both to chemical discomfort and rising anxiety. The boundary between daily routine and acute risk blurs. The entire community is left with profound questions. Can the pace of rising ground and persistent shaking be sustained without disaster? What would it mean for life, infrastructure, and economy if a sudden eruption, even minor, should occur? For now, the cracks remain small, but the fear is undeniably real. Sulfur. To outsiders, it remains a curious feature of science labs or distant volcanic eruptions. But for those at Campi Flegrei, it's a daily reality, literally etched onto walls and underfoot. In recent months, telltale white and yellow mineral blooms have appeared overnight, growing in the corners of courtyards, clinging to fountains and steps where children once played carelessly. The sharp sting of sulfur is more than unpleasant. It is a clear sign of heightened volcanic unrest. Humid mornings bring denser clouds of vapor curling from fissures, and an iridescent film appears on puddles and stone. Silverware blackens, doorknobs and railings corrode at record speed, revealing the intense chemical weathering at work. For locals, these aren't abstract markers of science, but reminders of the volcano's constant claim on their world. The chemistry is straightforward but powerful. As magma rises within the Campi Flegrei system, dissolved gases, including sulfur dioxide and hydrogen sulfide, are squeezed out, forced up through cracks as pressure builds. When these gases reach the surface, some react with the atmosphere to produce the classic rotten egg or acrid sulfur smell. The fumaroles of the caldera, some venerated since Roman times as mythic gates to the underworld, now pour out dense, smelly vapors at rates not seen in living memory. Historically, locals saw spikes in sulfur emissions as omens, sometimes attaching mystical meaning, sometimes correlating them with sickness, ruined crops, or difficult weather. Modern researchers, by contrast, use sensitive instruments to monitor sulfur output. A rise can precede or accompany changes in seismicity and ground deformation. Today, real-time monitoring stations record minute-by-minute variations, feeding the data to scientists racing to understand what might come next. One aspect remains clear. High sulfur emissions are not mere background noise, but integral warnings. The interplay of sulfur, rock, and air is underway even now, testing the resilience of buildings, the health of populations, and the capacity of authorities to cope. As the sulfur clouds roll on, the urgency grows, each day feeling more fraught, every breath a little sharper. The entire Campi Flegrei area now feels wound tight with anticipation. What powers this period of unrest? The answer is found in the magmatic and geothermal activity deep below Pozzuoli. A vast, pressurized zone of heated rock and water is accumulating energy, forcing its way upwards. This pressure triggers ongoing earthquake swarms, hundreds of small quakes in recent weeks, each indicating movement in subterranean reservoirs. Bradyseism, or slow earthquakes, is not new here. Ancient writers chronicled rising and falling harbors, while more recently, the 1982–84 crises forced evacuations and shaped emergency plans still referenced today. These events taught both citizens and leaders the value of preparedness. When evacuation orders are given, tens of thousands can be uprooted. Decades later, the landscape of readiness is more sophisticated. Emergency plans are practiced, and researchers model eruption scenarios. But the signs of this cycle's intensity are worrying scientists. Uplift rates are higher, sulfur gas readings are climbing. The metaphor of a boiling pot is apt. As the energy below increases, pressure on the crust mounts. If enough gas and magma accumulate, the balance may tip. Small fractures can suddenly join, opening pathways to the surface. The resulting eruption needn't be cataclysmic to cause extensive local disruption. Even minor events can ground flights, damage property, and force thousands from their homes. The pressure isn't just theoretical. Daily life is shifting in direct response. Municipal contractors repair gas and water mains more frequently. Insurance companies reassess risk ratings, and families debate whether to prepare for temporary relocation. Residents track news bulletins, sometimes obsessively, for updates on seismic or sulfur trends. With each new week of unrest, scientists are pressed to answer the same questions. Can the caldera withstand this buildup? Or is the system approaching its limit? Past crises suggest the possibility of sudden reversals, periods of relative calm, then resurgent risk. There's hope in technology and knowledge, but the danger is real, as anyone living here instinctively understands. Life at the Campi Flegrei caldera is steeped in the memory of ancient disaster. The fields of fire have been both curse and cradle for civilizations since the dawn of recorded time. Archaeological layers several meters thick testify to eruptions powerful enough to alter the climate, change coastlines, and drive mass migrations. Perhaps the most famous event is the so-called ignimbrite eruption, some 39,000 years ago, which scattered ash across thousands of kilometers. Some evidence suggests it may have been one factor in the decline of Neanderthal populations in southern Europe, though causes were complex. Later eruptions affected the Roman world, reshaping trade and creating the flooded ruins that now fascinate divers and historians alike. Every structure here reflects layers of adaptation. Domes repaired after quakes and eruptions, roads realigned to account for new cracks or subsidence, columns toppled by ground uplift or collapse. In some places, ground has risen or fallen by several meters over a few generations, pushing harbors underwater or exposing ancient pavements. Modern scientists, learning from these histories, have worked tirelessly to model future risks. Supercomputers crunch data from satellites and ground stations to simulate eruption scenarios, while emergency managers stockpile equipment and run drills in tandem with city officials. Yet, for every technological advance, the shadow of uncertainty remains, a reminder that Campi Flegrei's cycles of quiet and violence are measured in centuries and millennia, not the few decades most of us know. For those living here, and for scientists tasked with watching over them, the lesson is repeated. Adaptation, not conquest, is the only answer to such overwhelming natural force. Past civilizations adjusted, persisted, and sometimes failed. The present generation faces the same test, with greater knowledge, but still at the mercy of a capricious earth. Daily life across Pozzuoli and the surrounding coast reflects both the riches and the anxieties of existence on uncertain ground. The land remains fertile, sustaining vineyards, olives, and livestock. But since the latest phase of activity, routine has acquired a nervous undertone. Each morning, lines form outside pharmacies for masks and inhalers. Factories and offices review contingency plans first introduced in the last big crisis. In schools, evacuation drills are now part of the curriculum. Children trace out escape routes with their families, repeating instructions to duck and cover in the event of a quake. Shops post emergency numbers and distribute bottled water, both a nod to potential supply interruptions and a response to increased demand for clean air and water. For many families, the unease is deeply personal. Some, haunted by evacuation memories from the 20th century, quietly consider moving inland. Others, especially the elderly, resist the idea, tethered by history, connection, and resource limitations. Social networks and mutual aid groups have sprung up, helping to keep the community cohesive. Religious processions and festivals continue, but with extra prayers for safety and peace. Local authorities maintain open communications lines, updating the population as soon as new data emerges. Emergency shelters are identified, and mock evacuations are staged to keep the system robust. The city's technical and medical infrastructure is as prepared as possible, if always a step behind the volcano's potential. Residents, for now, persist, finding solace in routine, but wary of the big one. Cafes and squares, though vibrant, feel different, laughter edged with apprehension. The sulfur in the air is the most visceral reminder, piercing memories of past bradyseisms while warning of the ongoing risk. Each tremor and each chemical spike is felt both in the gut and in public conversation. Ultimately, life here is about balance, hope and anxiety, risk and reward. The region's beauty and productivity are undeniable, but the threat of sudden flight, of a mass exodus forced by ground unrest or eruption, hangs heavy. And so, with every reading and every warning, all lines point to the same sobering conclusion. Something is again stirring beneath Campi Flegrei, a phenomenon that has already shattered records for heat and ground displacement in the current scientific era. The volcano is shaking off its slumber. How violently remains to be seen. A full-scale Campi Flegrei eruption is, for volcanologists, among the gravest imaginable scenarios. If the sealing crust fails, the eruption could launch vast clouds of ash and gas over southern Italy and beyond. Airports would close, transport grind to a halt, and water and food supplies would be rapidly compromised. Hospitals might struggle with casualties from ash inhalation, burns, and infrastructure failure. Trade and travel could be crippled for months. Agriculture would be hit by fallout and altered weather. Although such colossal eruptions are rare, the smaller explosions that do occur are still immensely disruptive. Against this backdrop, scientists, civil defense officials, and residents combine vigilance and hope with precaution. Seismographs trace every jitter, gas measurements are updated in real time, and public information campaigns try to balance concern with reassurance. The broader world watches as well, aware that disaster in one region can ripple internationally in today's interconnected society. Yet the underlying tension is real. For all our knowledge, the precise timing of eruptions remains uncertain, sometimes preceded by weeks of warning, sometimes appearing with far less notice. Recent studies in bradyseism and geothermal activity have improved forecasting, but nature keeps its deepest secrets. As the days grow hotter, as sulfur fumes thread beneath the streetlights at dusk, the question lingers. Are we witnessing preludes or portents? Or has the next great chapter of Campi Flegrei's history yet to be written? The ground is no longer still, the volcano no longer voiceless. For Pozzuoli and all who live and hope in these trembling fields, the answer is shrouded in boiling stone, waiting beneath centuries of pressure. The world watches and waits, asking not only how to prepare, but whether any preparation is ever enough when the earth itself is restless.